The moment that doctor looked at my blood work and went pale, I knew something was wrong. He stepped out of the room without saying a word. Through the glass window, I watched him make a phone call, his hand pressed against his forehead like he was trying to process something impossible. 10 minutes later, three specialists crowded into that tiny ER room and stared at me like I was a ghost. Not with pity, not with concern, with complete and total disbelief. My name is Nolan Webb. I am 38 years old. 3 months before that night, I was cleaning toilets and mopping floors for minimum wage at that same hospital. I wore a gray uniform with my name stitched on the chest. I pushed a yellow mop bucket through hallways where nobody looked at me twice. I was invisible. I was nothing. I was a man whose cheating wife and her millionaire boyfriend had systematically destroyed everything I spent 15 years building. I used to be a senior structural engineer. I made $218,000 a year. I designed buildings that would stand for 100 years. I had a house in the suburbs, a retirement account, a future that looked stable and secure. Then my wife Simone decided I wasn't ambitious enough for her taste. She found a tech investor named Victor Holbrook who had $60 million in a yacht and all the things she believed she deserved. She didn't just leave me, she helped Victor burn my career to the ground. He made phone calls to the right people. I was fired without cause, blacklisted from every engineering firm in the region, watched my savings drain to nothing while Simone took the house and half of everything else. The night I started my janitor job, she sent me a photograph of herself on Victor's yacht somewhere in the Caribbean. The message attached said two words that still echo in my head: enjoy poverty. So there I was, 3 months into my new life as the guy who scrubs toilets for a living, sitting on a hospital bed with 16 stitches in my hand from a broken light bulb that sliced me open. My blood was all over my uniform. I had lost enough of it to make the nurses concerned. They ran tests. Standard procedure for a wound that severe. I expected them to tell me I was anemic, maybe diabetic, maybe something worse. At that point, I almost hoped it was something fatal. At least then the struggle would be over. But when Dr. Russell Adebayo returned with those three specialists, when they closed the door behind them and pulled up chairs like they were about to deliver news that would shatter my world, I realized this was something different entirely. The head of the genetics department sat down beside my bed and asked me a question that seemed to come from nowhere. "Mr. Webb, was your father adopted?" I told her, yes. George Webb was adopted as an infant in 1952. He never knew his biological parents, never searched for them, died believing the past didn't matter. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "A name that every person in Pennsylvania knows, a name attached to steel mills and skyscrapers and billions of dollars in charitable foundations, a name that belonged to one of the wealthiest families in American history. Mr. Webb, according to your genetic profile, you are the biological grandson of Elliot Thornwood." Elliot Thornwood had died 2 months earlier, at 94 years old. His estate was worth over $9 billion. He had no living heirs. His only son died decades ago without children, or so the world believed. But his son did have a child, a baby boy born in secret and given away to protect the family name. That baby was my father, and that meant I was the sole surviving heir to everything. The room started spinning. My stitches throbbed. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear what the doctor said next. 3 months ago, my cheating wife texted me to enjoy poverty. That night in the emergency room, covered in my own blood, I discovered that poverty was about to become a distant memory, and revenge was about to become very, very affordable. For 15 years, I was living what I believed was the American dream. I woke up every morning at 6, kissed my wife on the forehead, and drove 45 minutes to downtown Philadelphia, where I worked as a senior structural engineer at Bowman and Associates. It was one of the largest engineering firms on the East Coast. We designed hospitals, university buildings, corporate headquarters, structures that would outlast everyone who built them. I was proud of that work. I was proud of the career I had fought so hard to build. My salary had climbed steadily over the years until it reached $218,000 annually. I had a corner office with a view of the city skyline. I had a team of junior engineers who respected me. I had performance reviews that used words like exceptional and invaluable. I believed I had earned my place in the world through hard work and dedication. My wife Simone and I met during our junior year at Penn State. She was studying business, and I was deep into my engineering coursework. She was beautiful, ambitious, and relentlessly driven. She had this energy about her that made you feel like anything was possible. When she looked at me and told me I was going to be somebody important, I believed her. I wanted to be the man she saw when she looked at me. We got married 2 years after graduation. A small ceremony, modest reception, just family and close friends. My mother, Dorothy, cried through the entire service. My father, George, shook my hand and told me he was proud of the man I had become. That was the last time I remember feeling completely at peace with my life. My father passed away when I was 26. Heart attack, no warning. He was 61 years old and had worked in a steel mill since he was 18. His hands were rough and calloused from decades of hard labor, but he never complained. He used to say that honest work was its own reward, that a man's character was built through the things he endured without recognition. George Webb was adopted as an infant. He never knew his biological parents, and he never searched for them. When I asked him about it once, he just shrugged and said, "The people who raised you are your real family." Blood was just biology. Love was what mattered. I accepted that answer and never pushed further. I wish now that I had asked more questions. I wish I had known what secrets were buried in his past. After my father died, my mother, Dorothy, became the center of my family life. She had worked as a nurse at Philadelphia General Hospital for 30 years before retiring. She was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes that could see right through any lie I tried to tell. She never trusted Simone completely. She would make comments that seemed innocent on the surface, but carried sharp edges underneath. "That girl loves your potential more than she loves you, Nolan," she told me once after a family dinner where Simone spent the entire evening talking about money. I dismissed it as typical mother-in-law friction. Mothers never think anyone is good enough for their sons. I told myself Dorothy would come around eventually. I had a younger brother named Dennis who lived in Chicago with his wife Trina and their 2 kids. We talked on the phone every few weeks, traded text messages about football games and family updates, but we were never particularly close. He had his life, and I had mine. We existed in parallel without intersecting much. My life revolved around 2 things: my career and my marriage. I poured everything into both. I worked late nights and weekends to meet deadlines. I took Simone on vacations to places she wanted to visit. I bought her jewelry on anniversaries and surprised her with flowers for no reason. I thought I was building something permanent. I thought if I just worked hard enough and loved her completely enough, we would grow old together the way my parents did. The first cracks appeared about 2 years before everything collapsed. Simone had transitioned from commercial real estate into luxury properties. She started attending networking events with wealthy clients, private showings at penthouses that cost more than I would earn in a decade. She came home later and later. She talked constantly about money, about people who had more than us, about the lifestyle she deserved. I noticed the changes, but convinced myself they were just phases. Career ambition, professional growth, nothing to worry about. I trusted her completely because I had never had a reason not to trust her. I believed in our marriage the way I believed in the buildings I designed: solid, permanent, built to last. I was wrong about all of it, and I was about to discover exactly how wrong I had been. The night I discovered the truth about Simone, I came home early from work with a migraine. The house was quiet when I walked through the front door. Her car was in the driveway, but she didn't answer when I called her name. I walked upstairs to take some medication and lie down in the dark. That's when I heard her voice coming from our bedroom. She was laughing. That soft, flirtatious laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in years. I stood outside the door and listened to her talking on the phone. He has no idea. He's so focused on his little blueprints and engineering projects that he doesn't notice anything. I could pack a suitcase and walk out tomorrow, and he probably wouldn't realize I was gone until dinner got cold. My chest tightened. I pushed the door open slowly. She was lying on our bed in a silk robe, her phone pressed to her ear, smiling at something the other person said. When she saw me standing there, her face went pale for exactly 2 seconds. Then she recovered and told whoever she was talking to that she would call them back. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked. "Long enough." She didn't apologize. She didn't make excuses. She just sighed like I was an inconvenience she had been tolerating for too long. "His name is Victor Holbrook. He's a client. We've been seeing each other for about 8 months. 8 months. She said it so casually, like she was telling me about a gym membership she forgot to mention. I felt my knees go weak. I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. "Why?" I managed to ask. She stood up from the bed and walked toward her closet like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "Because Victor is going places, Nolan. He has $60 million. He takes me to Paris for the weekend. He introduces me to people who actually matter in this world. You take me to Applebee's and talk about concrete stress loads." I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to throw something, but all I could do was stand there in shock while the woman I had loved for 15 years dismantled our marriage with the indifference of someone returning a sweater that didn't fit. "I want a divorce," she said. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. The next 3 months were the worst of my life." Simone moved into Victor's penthouse while our lawyers fought over assets. She wanted the house. She wanted half my retirement. She wanted spousal support because she claimed her career had suffered while supporting my ambitions. The cruelty of that argument made my head spin. I had supported her through every career change, every new certification, every networking event that kept her out until midnight. But the financial devastation was nothing compared to what came next. 3 weeks after Simone filed for divorce, I was called into the office of Richard Bowman, the CEO of my firm. Richard was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had built Bowman and Associates from nothing, and he ran it like a kingdom, where he was the only authority that mattered. "Sit down, Nolan." I sat across from his desk while he shuffled papers and avoided eye contact. "We're restructuring the engineering department. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. HR will process your severance and collect your credentials." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Eliminated. "Richard, I've been here for 15 years. My performance reviews have been flawless. I just finished the Harrisburg Medical Center project 2 months ahead of schedule." He finally looked at me, and there was something in his eyes that told me this decision had nothing to do with my performance. "The decision has been made. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings." I found out later what had really happened. Victor Holbrook had investments in 3 construction firms that regularly contracted with Bowman and Associates. He also played golf with Richard Bowman every Sunday at an exclusive country club in the suburbs. Victor had made phone calls. He had whispered in the right ears. He had decided that ruining my marriage wasn't enough. He wanted to destroy my career too. The severance package was insulting. 8 weeks of pay for 15 years of dedication. My lawyer said I could fight it, but litigation would cost more than I would ever recover. The legal system was designed for people who could afford to wait years for justice. I couldn't afford to wait weeks for groceries. I applied to every engineering firm within a 100 miles. I sent out resumes, made phone calls, reached out to former colleagues and professional contacts. The responses were always the same: polite rejections, positions suddenly filled, interviews that ended with promises to call back that never materialized. I didn't understand what was happening until a former coworker named Mitchell took me out for a beer and told me the truth. "Victor Holbrook has been making calls, Nolan. He's telling people you're difficult to work with, unreliable. He's saying you were fired for performance issues. Nobody wants to touch you." I was blacklisted, erased from an industry I had given my entire adult life to, and there was nothing I could do about it. Within 6 months, I went from a corner office to a studio apartment in Kensington, one of the roughest neighborhoods in Philadelphia. The place was 400 square feet with water stains on the ceiling and bars on the windows. I could hear my neighbors arguing through walls so thin they might as well have been cardboard. At night, sirens wailed constantly, and I learned to sleep with a pillow over my head. My savings evaporated faster than I thought possible. Rent, food, utilities, car payments, insurance. The math never worked, no matter how many times I ran the numbers. I sold my watch, sold my golf clubs, sold everything that wasn't essential to survival. It still wasn't enough. My mother called me every single day. She begged me to move in with her, but I couldn't do that. She was 72 years old, living on a fixed income from Social Security and her modest pension. Her house was small, and her health wasn't what it used to be. I refused to become another burden she had to carry. "I'm fine, Mom," I told her every time. "I just need to get back on my feet." I wasn't fine. I was drowning. The only job I could find was a night janitor position at Philadelphia General Hospital. Minimum wage, $11.50 an hour to mop floors, clean bathrooms, empty trash cans, and scrub things that made my stomach turn. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother had worked at that same hospital for 30 years as a respected nurse. Now, her son pushed a mop bucket through those halls like a ghost nobody wanted to see. I worked the overnight shift from 10 gassed at night until 6 o'clock in the morning. The hospital never slept, but the night hours had a different rhythm, quieter, lonelier. I moved through corridors where doctors and nurses rushed past without acknowledging my existence. I was invisible, just another guy in a gray uniform with a name tag that nobody bothered to read. The shame was overwhelming. I had spent my entire adult life building something I was proud of. I had designed structures that would stand for generations. Now I was scrubbing toilets and picking up trash for less money than I used to spend on a single dinner out with Simone. The night she sent me that text message, I was on my hands and knees cleaning a spill in the emergency department waiting room. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw her name on the screen. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. It was a photograph of Simone and Victor on a yacht. Crystal blue water in the background. She was wearing a white bikini and oversized sunglasses, leaning against him with a champagne glass in her hand. They looked like an advertisement for a life I would never have. The caption beneath the photo said, "Enjoy poverty, should have been more ambitious." I stared at that message for a long time. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. There's a difference. Breaking means giving up. Cracking means something is about to shift. I didn't respond. I put my phone back in my pocket and finished cleaning the spill. Then I went back to work because that was the only thing I could control. Show up, do the job, survive another day. 3 months passed in a blur of exhaustion and routine. I lost 20 lb because I couldn't afford to eat properly. I stopped calling friends because I had nothing to say. I existed in a fog of despair that grew thicker every day. The night everything changed started like any other shift. I was replacing a burned-out light fixture in a storage room near the emergency department. The bulb was stuck, and I was trying to twist it free when the glass shattered in my hand. The pain was immediate and intense. Blood poured from my palm and wrist where the jagged edges had sliced deep into my skin. I stumbled backward and knocked over a shelf of supplies. The noise brought a nurse running. She found me slumped against the wall, pressing a rag against my hand while blood soaked through the fabric. I was dizzy. The room was spinning. She called for help, and suddenly I was being rushed into the emergency department as a patient instead of the guy who cleaned their floors. They put me on a bed and started working on my hand. A young doctor named Russell Adabio examined the wounds and told me I would need stitches. 16 of them, as it turned out. He was calm and professional with kind eyes that didn't look through me the way most people did. "You lost a good amount of blood," he said while he worked. "We're going to run some tests just to make sure everything looks okay. Standard procedure for a wound this severe." I nodded and let him do his job. I assumed they would check my iron levels, maybe test for infection, routine medical stuff. I had no idea that a simple blood test was about to unravel a secret that had been buried for almost 40 years. Dr. Adabio finished the stitches and told me to rest while they waited for the lab results. I lay on that hospital bed in my blood-stained janitor uniform and stared at the ceiling. I thought about my father, George, and how he used to tell me that hard times build character. I wondered what he would think if he could see me now. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out things about my father that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my blood, and my place in the world. Dr. Adabio returned about an hour later, but he wasn't alone. 2 other doctors followed him into the room, both wearing expressions I couldn't read. They stood at the foot of my bed and exchanged glances like they were silently deciding who would speak first. "Mr. Webb, we found some anomalies in your blood work," Dr. Adabio said carefully. "I've asked some colleagues to consult on your case." My heart sank. I assumed the worst. Cancer, leukemia, some rare disease that would be the final chapter in my miserable story. Part of me almost felt relieved. At least it would be over. "Just tell me," I said. "Whatever it is, I can handle it." Dr. Adabio shook his head. "It's not what you're thinking. This isn't about illness. We found some unusual genetic markers in your blood. Markers that triggered a flag in our hospital's database." Before I could ask what that meant, the door opened again. An older woman in a white coat entered the room. She had sharp eyes behind, wire-framed glasses, and an air of authority that made the other doctors step aside. "Mr. Webb, I'm Dr. Pauline Weaver. I'm the head of the genetics department here at Philadelphia General. I apologize for the intrusion, but what we discovered in your blood work is quite extraordinary." She pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. The other doctors remained standing, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "I need to ask you some questions about your family history," Dr. Weaver continued, "specifically about your father. Was he adopted?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes, he was adopted as an infant in 1952. He never knew his biological parents." Dr. Weaver nodded slowly, like I had just confirmed something she already suspected. "Did he ever attempt to find them? Any records? Any information at all?" "No, he wasn't interested. He always said, 'The people who raised you are your real family.'" She was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned forward and spoke in a tone that was both gentle and deliberate. "Mr. Webb, your blood contains genetic markers that we have only encountered once before in our entire database. These markers are associated with a very specific bloodline, a family whose medical records have been part of our system for decades due to their substantial donations to this hospital." My mouth went dry. "What family?" "The Thornwood family. The name hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in Pennsylvania knew the Thornwoods. Elliot Thornwood built a steel empire in the early 1900s that made him one of the wealthiest men in America. The Thornwood Foundation had donated hundreds of millions of dollars to hospitals, universities, and charities across the country. Their name was on buildings, scholarships, and research centers throughout the state. Elliot Thornwood had died 2 months earlier at 94 years old. His death dominated the news for weeks because he left behind an estate worth over $9 billion. But there was a complication with the inheritance that lawyers and journalists had been dissecting ever since. Elliot had no living heirs. His only son, Franklin Thornwood, died in a car accident in 1985. Franklin never married and had no children, or so the official story claimed. When Elliot passed away, his will specified that his fortune would go to any biological descendants. If none existed, the estate would be dissolved and distributed to various charitable foundations. Dr. Weaver watched my face as the pieces started connecting in my mind. Mr. Webb, according to your genetic profile, you are the biological grandson of Elliot Thornwood. Your father, George, was the illegitimate son of Franklin Thornwood. He was born in 1952 as the result of an affair Franklin had with a woman who worked at the family estate. The pregnancy was hidden, and the baby was given up for adoption to protect the family's reputation. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was shrinking around me. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My father was nobody. He worked in a steel mill his whole life. He never had money. He never had connections. He never knew who he really was," Dr. Weaver said softly. "The adoption records were sealed. The Thornwood family made sure of that. But DNA doesn't lie, Mr. Webb. We ran the test 3 times to be certain. You are Franklin Thornwood's grandson. You are the sole surviving heir to the Thornwood estate." The next several weeks were a hurricane of lawyers, DNA verification, and media frenzy. The Thornwood Foundation's legal team initially contested my claim. They had spent months preparing to distribute the estate according to Elliot's charitable wishes. A janitor appearing out of nowhere claiming to be the lost heir seemed like a bad movie plot. But the evidence was undeniable. 3 independent laboratories confirmed my genetic connection to the Thornwood bloodline. Genealogists traced my father's adoption records back to a Catholic orphanage in Pittsburgh that had received substantial donations from the Thornwood family in 1952. The same year, George Webb was born and given away. The legal battle lasted 6 weeks. In the end, the courts ruled in my favor. Elliot Thornwood's will was explicit. Any biological descendant would inherit everything. On a cold Thursday afternoon in Pittsburgh, I sat in a conference room surrounded by lawyers and formally accepted my inheritance, $9.4 billion. I walked out of that building into the winter air and felt the cold sting my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Nolan, I saw the news. Congratulations. I always believed in you. Maybe we should talk. I miss you, Simone." I read those words and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just emptiness where love used to live. I blocked her number without responding and slid the phone back into my pocket. But I wasn't finished. Simone had sent me a message 7 months ago telling me to enjoy poverty. Now it was time to send a message of my own. The first thing I did with my new resources was hire a team of investigators and lawyers, not to protect my wealth, to dismantle the people who had tried to destroy me. Victor Holbrook had built his fortune on a foundation of questionable deals and borderline illegal transactions. It took my team less than 3 weeks to compile enough evidence to send to the Securities and Exchange Commission insider trading, market manipulation, fraudulent investment schemes. The man who had whispered in ears to get me blacklisted had left a trail of crimes that nobody had bothered to follow until now. I also acquired controlling interests in 3 construction companies that regularly contracted with Bowman and Associates. Then I made a personal phone call to Richard Bowman, the man who had fired me without hesitation because a wealthy investor asked him to. "Mr. Bowman, this is Nolan Webb. You probably remember me. I'm the engineer you terminated 7 months ago because Victor Holbrook played golf with you on Sundays." I could hear him breathing on the other end. He didn't say a word. "I'm calling to inform you that Thornwood Holdings is terminating all contracts with your firm effective immediately. I'm also calling to let you know that Victor Holbrook is currently under federal investigation for securities fraud, information that I personally provided to the authorities. I thought you should hear it from me before you read about it in the news." He stammered something about misunderstandings and difficult decisions. I didn't let him finish. "Goodbye, Richard. I hope you land on your feet better than I did." Victor Holbrook's investment fund collapsed within 4 months. Investors filed lawsuits. Federal charges followed. His $60 million evaporated into legal fees and settlements. The man who had stolen my wife and destroyed my career was left with nothing but debt and disgrace. Simone had married Victor 2 months after our divorce was finalized. She had traded me for what she thought was a permanent upgrade. But when Victor's empire crumbled, she found herself attached to a sinking ship. She filed for divorce from him 8 months later. I heard she moved back to Ohio to live with her sister. I never spoke to her again. I thought about reaching out, not to reconcile, but to say something, to let her know that I had survived what she tried to do to me. But every time I considered it, I realized that my silence was the most powerful message I could send. She would spend the rest of her life knowing that the man she discarded as worthless had become one of the wealthiest people in the country. That knowledge would eat at her far more than any words I could say. The money changed my circumstances, but I refused to let it change who I was. I didn't buy a mansion or a fleet of cars or any of the ridiculous things people expect billionaires to own. I bought a modest 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside Philadelphia. I hired a small staff to help manage my affairs. I lived simply because simplicity had taught me what truly mattered. The first major decision I made was donating $4 billion to the Thornwood Foundation. Elliot Thornwood had spent his life building something that would outlast him. I wanted to honor that legacy. The foundation expanded its work in education, healthcare, and poverty relief. I became actively involved in directing where the money went, making sure it reached people who needed it most. My mother, Dorothy, moved into a beautiful cottage near Valley Forge with a garden she had always dreamed of having. I visit her every Sunday for dinner. She cooks pot roast and tells me stories about my father that I never heard before. She still cries sometimes when she looks at me, unable to believe how far we have come from those dark days when I was mopping floors and wondering if life was worth living. I returned to Philadelphia General Hospital last spring, not as a patient or a janitor, but as a benefactor. I donated $50 million to build a new wing dedicated to nursing education and patient care. They named it the Dorothy Webb Center for Nursing Excellence. When my mother saw her name on that building, she broke down in my arms. It was the proudest moment of my life. Dr. Russell Adabo still works at the hospital. He's now the head of the emergency department, a promotion funded partly by my donations. We have lunch together occasionally. He told me once that he almost didn't order those extra blood tests the night I cut my hand. Something just told him to dig deeper. I think about that often, how a single decision by a young doctor changed the entire trajectory of my existence. My brother Dennis and I are closer now than we have ever been. His kids call me Uncle Nolan and beg me to tell them the story of how I went from cleaning toilets to inheriting billions. I tell them an edited version that leaves out the pain and betrayal. They don't need to know about the nights I lay awake wondering if anyone would notice if I disappeared. They just need to know that their uncle never gave up. I learned something in those dark months that no amount of money could ever teach me. Your lowest moment is not your final moment. The night I sat on that hospital bed with blood soaking through my uniform, I had nothing. No career, no marriage, no hope. I was ready to surrender to the darkness that had been pulling at me for months. But I kept showing up. I kept putting one foot in front of the other, even when every step felt pointless. I didn't know that my blood carried a secret worth billions. I didn't know that my father was the hidden son of one of America's wealthiest families. I just knew that quitting wasn't an option because my mother raised me better than that. And my father taught me that character is built through endurance. The DNA in my veins didn't save me. The money didn't save me. Refusing to quit saved me. Showing up for that janitor job night after night saved me. Surviving when survival felt impossible saved me. Simone once told me I wasn't ambitious enough. She was wrong. I wasn't ambitious for the things she valued. I was ambitious for something far more important. I was ambitious to remain a good man, even when the world gave me every reason to become bitter and broken. My father George never knew he was a Thornwood. He died believing he was just a steelworker's son who lived a simple life. But he raised me with values that no inheritance could ever provide. He taught me that honest work has dignity. He taught me that the people who love you are your real family. He taught me that blood is just biology, but character is a choice you make every single day. I am Nolan Thornwood Webb. I am a billionaire, an engineer, a son, a brother, and a man who once cleaned toilets for $11.50 an hour. I am all of those things because every experience shaped me into who I needed to become. And I am living proof that your story isn't over until you decide it's over. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that rock bottom is not the end, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know who in your life is quietly struggling and needs a reminder that their breakthrough could be just around the corner. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of this story hit you the hardest. I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. If you're not subscribed to this channel yet, what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. We post videos every week that will inspire you, move you, and remind you that extraordinary things can happen to ordinary people. Thank you for watching until the end. It means more than you know. I'll see you in the next